Happy Tuesday, everybody. We're on to another community deck tech, and we had 8 submissions this week, so I got through 4 of them. So if you're not on this list, I apologize. Squealer, I'm sorry, buddy. I liked your Dimir Control list, and Zameth, I liked. I mean, Trucker Philosophy, and what was the other one? Cook. I apologize I didn't get to your lists. I did look at them. I did like what you were doing. Hopefully there's some crossover. Like, I think it was Zameth who was running a Boros, or no, it was Trucker Philosophy who was running a Boros Convoke list. So hopefully I can kind of talk to both, right? And then Dimir Control, like, you know, I'll be happy to talk to you on Discord just separately to give you my thoughts on the archetype. So with that being said, thank you everybody for your submissions. I appreciate it. You make this work by, humoring me. And so we're going to look at Boros Token Burn by Why Do Babies Stare at Me? And the first thing I like to do is I like to go over the lands. So you're on 21 lands here, and I'd be on 22 in best of 3 and 21 in best of 1, because you do have 4 of the fear of missing out. And part of this is to be educational for people who are making their own decks as well. So for anything that is a 1-costed or 2-costed card that allows you to draw or loot, you can usually... Sorry, for every 3 or so, you can cut a land, right? So since we've got 4, fear missing out allows us to cut 1 land. The other thing too is we only have 11 untapped red sources, which really only inhibits us doing a turn 1 Torch the Tower, which is not part of what this deck is really trying to do. So it's not a really big problem. And but we do have 16, or I guess 15 sources, because the Restless Bivouac comes into play tapped. That gives us the 14 that is needed for a single pip to play this on turn 1, or the Novice Inspector on turn 1. So you're good there. And then I do think I would be tempted to ditch the Fountain Port and the Mirrex to get the red up to 18. What that would allow you to do is play something like Arabella and Gleeful Demolition and do a double spell, because 1 double pip red needs 18 sources of red to be able to cast that on turn 3 90% of the time. So something to just consider, the pros and cons, right? Like if you bring in the 2 more colored lands, then that would allow you to double spell more consistently on turn 3. But if you're just planning 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, then these give you better value later in the game. So pros and cons. Okay, so the next thing, so the overall deck is kind of a combination of Boros Tokens and Boros Convoke. And Boros Tokens is more of a control deck, whereas Boros Tokens is more of a control deck, whereas Boros Convoke is more of an aggro combo deck. So you've kind of gone into mixing 2 archetypes together that aren't really in alignment with the same. They're not trying to do the same exact thing, right? So it's a unique take. You do have some of the synergies. So like for Boros Tokens, you have the Caretaker's Talent with the Urbrask's Forge, which triggers the card drive return, and then you have the Get Lost for the single point interaction, and you also have the Torch the Tower. So you've got some good removal, and then you also have the Braids, which are your own kind of inclusion. And then what you don't have from the Boros Tokens build, though, is the Brotherhood's End and the Sunfall. So you're not going off of the Wraths, right? And the Caretaker strategy of drawing the cards off of the Urbrask's Forge is trying to answer things 1 for 1, and the Wraths help do that because they answer for things better than 1 for 1. So just, again, pros and cons, what you're kind of giving and letting go by bringing in the Boros Convoke side of things. And then you're also not running the Lightning Helix, which is fine. And then you're also not running the Kutzel's Flanker. A lot of the Boros Tokens lists I see bring in some Graveyard Hate, just so that you have more answers for the control matchups, like if you come up against Azorius Omniscience, right? So these are all suggestions that you could explore as well if you want to take the deck in a different direction. The Boros Convoke side of things, you've got the Gleeful Demolition, you've got the Novice Inspector, and you've got the Arabella, Abandoned Doll. Sometimes we see this, sometimes not. And then we've got the 4 copies of the Nesting Doll, or Nesting Bot, which I think fits really nicely into this because it gives us another Gleeful Demolition target. But what you aren't running is the Clockwork Percussionist, which is the 1/1 for 1 red. You're not running the Imidane's Recruiter, which allows you to kind of, win on turn 3, almost, maybe win on turn 4. And then Resolute Reinforcements to lean off of like the Knight Errant of Eos. So taking the deck into a different direction than the strictly Convoke side of things. Now, you're bringing in the War Leader's Call, which we have seen in Boros Convoke as a way to kind of hate on other control matchups. And so if you're trying to like slow the game down with your Braids and your Get Losts and your Torch the Towers, then you can kind of grind them out with the War Leader's Call. And the Fear of Missing Out works really well with the Urabrask's Forge. I really like the synergy of that because you can trigger multiple combats, which means the Forge triggers multiple times in one turn. So I'm not saying the deck is bad. I'm just saying that like it's got some interesting tension on whether or not it is a combo deck that is trying to go wide off of Gleeful Demolition, or if it's a control deck that's not running the Wraths, that's trying to outvalue your opponent off the Caretaker's talent. So, which is going to change its matchups if it's not really, it's somewhere in between, right? And you named it a burn deck, but you're not really like playing any burn, right? You don't have any Bolt Waves or Lightning Helix, so you're not going face with any damage outside of the War Leader's Call kind of pinging them. So it's an interesting take on Boros tokens, and maybe I didn't do it justice with my comments, but I hope they find you well. Second up on the list is Dimir Network by Zigzag 2370. And again, these are all chosen at random. Zigzag just happens to always be chosen because I guess they're lucky. And so this one was kind of they originally had submitted an Esper build that was trying to utilize and showcase the Haunt the Network. And this was kind of their last minute submission this morning, where they've kind of landed on it. And I like this build a lot more than what the Esper was doing because your mana base was really bad for the Esper deck. You were running 9 black and trying to play things like the 1 double pip black for Malicious Eclipse, that sort of thing, off of the prototype for the 7-drop and whatnot. So you needed more black sources in that original build. So this one is on 23 lands, and I think I would be on 26 in best of 3 and in best of 1. The reason being that even if you are cheesing the 3-fold Thunder Hulk and the Hulking Metamorph out, you're primarily doing that through the Coiling Rebirth. You can do it through the Vat of Rebirth as well, but still, you're trying to hit this on turn 5. And so this sort of thing where you're playing like a control deck, I really don't like missing land drops. And so like if you get stuck on 3, I'd rather have more lands in hand that I can pitch away to like Stern Lesson and Bitter Triumph in a pinch if I'm flooding out. I get that you're trying to discard the Hulking Metamorph for the 3-fold Thunder Hulk to have a good target to bring back with the Coiling Rebirth. And I like the synergy of the 3-fold Thunder Hulk creating a whole bunch of artifact gnomes that then make it so you can hit like a 20 plus damage Haunt the Network. I think it's a cool strategy. But I do think that the lands need to be tweaked a little bit for my liking, right? Because you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 colorless lands in here, which is a lot for even a 2-color deck. Even a monocolored deck would struggle to have 7 colorless lands. So I would increase the land count overall, and I'd also fix the lands a little bit. So 1 double pip black wants 18 sources of black to cast on turn 3, and I think we want to be casting things like Malicious Eclipse against mono red on turn 3, so I would get another black source in there. 2 CC, so like your prototype cost for the Hulking Metamorph, that one wants 16 blue, and right now you're at 11. That one's a little less important. I would at least get the Stern Lesson, which is the 2C, which wants 12 blue. So I'd at least get that up to 12 from 11, so I get 1 more blue source in there so that you can cast Stern Lesson on turn 3 90% of the time. And then 3 CC for like your Coiling Rebirth, which seems to be a pretty important part of the strategy to me, wants 15 black, and you have 17. So maybe, with that, I hope that finds your good spot to operate in. And you could probably choose like at least one of these needs to go, right? Like, I'm fine if you keep the Fountain Ports, but then ditch the Mirrex, keep the Mirrex and then ditch the Fountain Port, that sort of thing. And then I do think that Enigma Jewel is a possibility if you wanted to bring in more Collector's Vaults, because Collector's Vaults helps you discard the cards to then reanimate with your Coiling Rebirth. And I do like that synergy. And you've got a couple of things that have, like the activation for the Vat of Rebirth, Ghost Vacuum, the Thran Spider for the dig. It's an artifact as well. So just something to consider. I'm not exactly sure what I would take out for it. It may be like the Ghost Vacuum, but I get that this wins games against certain archetypes. So anyway, this one, it's cool. I see where you're going. I think it's been an improvement from the Sultai version and the Esper version and now into Dimir. So really excited to see where the final build of this goes. And thank you for the submission, Zigzag. And then the third one to win the die roll was J Money, 9494 with Jeskai Control. And this one is leaning off of the All Will Be One with the Millennium calendar, which I think is kind of a fun little, not super competitive strategy, but just it's definitely like a fun one, right? It's a fun way to fun win condition for a control deck. And I did want to talk about the lands. So you're on 25. I'd be on 25 in best of 3 and in best of 1. You usually shave lands more in best of 1 if you're not playing control. Like the more stuff that you have that's CMC 5 and higher gets punished for cutting lands. So that's why there'll be a suggestion that's different for best of 1 for the smaller, more aggro builds like the Boros Convoke strategy, and not for the control. And then we just want to kind of go through the same process as before. If you're doing a Brotherhood's End to try to protect yourself against getting swarmed by an early aggressive strategy, you want to cast this on turn 3. To cast this on turn 3, you need to have 18 sources of red, and you're at 12. So you are running 3 Arid Archways. I would get rid of these. I do not think that colorless lands do particularly well in the multicolored decks. Even I would be hard-pressed to say that you can find room for Arid Archway in a 2-colored deck. And you don't also have a ton of stuff that's really expensive to activate. So I don't think you need to ramp with the Arid Archway. So I'd consider getting more red sources in here for the Brotherhood's End. Now, going down the list, your next most difficult thing to cast is the Day of Judgment with 2 double pip white. That one wants 16 sources of white, and you have 17, so you're good there. You could even drop 1 white and bring in 1 red, I think. You also have 3 CC for the All Will Be One. This one wants 15 sources of red, and you have 12. So again, if you could get rid of the 3 Arid Archways and put this up to 15 sources of red, you'd be able to cast All Will Be One on turn 5 90% of the time. And then if you go a little bit further for the Brotherhood's End, you'd have to bring in some... You'd really have to stress your mana base to be able to make this happen on turn 3, which I'm not sure it's super important. And then your other one thing, like Authority of Consuls, if you want to cast this 90% of the time on turn 1, then you want 14 sources of white. And right now you have 17. So I think you've got a little bit too much white in the deck, a little bit too less red. 1C for Negate, for example, wants 13 blue. Not sure you really want to cast Negate on turn 2, but since we're talking about mana bases in general, just thought I'd throw them out there. And then 2C, like Stock Up, like I mentioned before, wants 12 sources of blue. And so with the 10 sources of blue that you have right now, you're shy of casting Negate, until turn 5. And same with your Stock Ups. Your Stock Ups are looking like you're going to have that 1 source of blue more reliably by turn 5. So you might want to tweak that as well. Yeah, like I mentioned, get rid of the colorless lands would help you a lot. And then the rest of it I like, though. I mean, you've got like the Authority of the Consuls. I'm you know what, you could make your life easier and just do Split Up, because it works with the Authority of the Consuls, and then you don't need to do the 3 damage to everything. You can just destroy everything. You've also got the Sweeper of Day of Judgment and Sunfall, so you've got a lot of sweepers already. And you've got the single point interaction with Get Lost and Not on My Watch, so a lot of your components are there. Then you have Chimil the Inner Sun to help you kind of outvalue your opponent. The Tablet of Completion synergizes with the Millennium Calendar. I see where you're going with that. And then also gives you some card draw. So all in all, I think you've got all the pieces there. Just needs a couple of tweaks on the mana base, and then I like what I'm seeing. So thanks for the submission there, J Money. All right, and the last person to win the die roll was Harder by Sean, Dur by Sean, with a Gruul Humans build, and it's it's Gruul Humans and Friends, right? Some spicy chickens, I think is what you said. So this one, my biggest before we get into the lands, let's just Paleontologist feels awkward in this because if you had a 1 mana dork, you would be able to ramp into turn 3. And if you have a 2 mana dork, then you are ramping into turn 4, which you don't have. So like I feel like even though it doesn't fix for red, you would be able to tap a Land of War Elves for a turn 2 Screaming Nemesis, Urbrask's Forge, or Samut, which feels better to me than what the Paleontologist is offering. Now, I do get that you can use this as Graveyard Hate. I have lost to that playing like Azorius Omniscience. The Paleontologist is relevant. But the other thing that you asked me to help you with was building a sideboard, and I would just bring in the Ghost Vacuums. So I would replace the Paleontologist with the Land of War Elves. I think that'll help your curve out quite a bit. And then we'll go over the sideboard in a second here. So again, 1 CC wants the 18 sources of red. And I've got to hold the phone. All right, sorry about that. Trying to multitask here with dinner. Okay, so where were we? Yeah, we talked about the Land of War Elves and lands. I would be on, right now you're on 24. I would be on 23 in best of 3 or paper. I'd be in 22 in best of 1 because you are capping out on turn 3 and not going on. I mean, Kogla and Yadaro, you got only 2 of them. Yeah, so I think you could justify going a little bit lower. As far as your lands are good for this build, but if we're going to move the Paleontologist into a Land of War Elves, then we're going to want to have more green sources on turn 1. And right now, you have 10. Because the I'm not counting the Myrixes, and then let's see here, and not the Verges, because the Verges come in as a red, right? So no, turn 1, they're not giving you that green. So you're going to need to tweak the lands a little bit to be able to get to the 14 untapped sources of green for the Land of War Elves, but I do think it will help this deck, especially because you aren't running anything double pip red. So I think you could kind of tweak this a little bit to be a little bit more sided towards green on turn 1, and which shouldn't cause too many problems. And then the other thing too is Kogla and Yadaro is not actually that hard to cast. It always looks like it is, but because it's a 6-drop, you actually only need 13 sources to be able to cast this pretty reliably, and so I wouldn't worry too much about having the double pip red here. Usually what I do when you have like double pip green, double pip red in the same card is just add 1 mana to its requirement. So this one is 14 then, and you're good there, right? You're not going to have a problem casting the Kogla. So the overall deck, though, you're using like Samut to be able to draw into threats. You've got the Urbrask's Forge, and what I really like about this is snagging people off guard with the instant speed Take for a Ride. So this one isn't one that we usually see, but being able to sacrifice the Firebrand, which is why you're like, why is this in here? Being able to catch your opponent off guard by committing the crime is what this is all about, right? So I'm not trying to tweak this in any other fashion. I'm trying to stay true to the deck. I like where it's going. And then you've got a lot of haste too, right? So you're able to burst out and get that damage off, or get the card draw off of Samut with the Forge or the Nemesis. And then you've got the Questing Druid in here for additional card draw. The Tear Asunder, if you've got enough artifact and enchantment hate in the meta, which I think there is, then you can justify running the green Disenchant. Could also just be a Lightning Strike. Kind of depends on where you want to go with it, right? And but the main point of this was they wanted help building a best of 3 sideboard. So I threw together kind of what I consider to be the standard just Gruul sideboard for the meta right now. So I threw in 3 Pop Hatch formations. This is really good against any of the like Zur enchantment decks. It's decent against the Oculus deck with the Flyer if you're going to try to get rid of their reanimated Oculus. It's good against any of the Unholy Annex builds if you're still bumping into those, although we've seen them kind of die out a little bit. Pop Hatch Recruit is in here to help punish your opponent from using single point interaction on your Land of War Elves and your early drops. So against like black, it's pretty nice to have a Pop Hatch Recruit. And you could bump this up to 2 if you wanted to go in a different direction. I'll just start it off here with 1 though. And then we've got the 2 Obstinate Baloths because of how popular Esper Pixies is. I would say that if you're in green, Obstinate Baloth is a nice one to have to punish the Hopeless Nightmare, and also good against other decks that have like Liliana. And then we've got the 2 copies of the Obliterating Bolt, and you could sub this one down. It depends on how much you're coming up against, like Preacher of the Schism, the Sentinel of the Nameless City, that sort of thing. If you're coming up against that less often, then maybe, take out the Obliterating Bolt for a Pop Hatch Recruit, that sort of thing, right? 2 Lithomatic Barrage is pretty nice for any of the white or blue decks. Works well against Esper. It works well against the Dimir Midrange, Dimir Bounce, Azorius Oculus, anything that's got white and blue. Ghost Vacuum is good for the Graveyard Hate. Since I recommend getting rid of the Paleontologist, then we still want to be able to have Graveyard Hate in best of 3. And so 2 copies of Ghost Vacuum I think is the best option in red and green. And then the 3 copies of the Sunspine Lynx I think is a pretty nice inclusion. And I think I mentioned bringing the land count down. I think you can still bring it down from 24 even with the Sunspine Lynxes. Do keep in mind it might be a little bit harder to cast if you decrease the amount of red, because the 2cc wants 16. So right now you're at 18 sources of red, so you've got no problem with the Sunspine Lynx, and you're not really casting the Obstinate Baloth. So this one is good against Domain and Esper Self Bounce. Anything with 3 colors or more can be really punished by the Sunspine Lynx and is a nice sideboard option to have. So thank you, Harder by Sean, for the submission, and hope this finds you well. Thanks for the unique take on Gruul Humans. So once again, sorry guys if I didn't get to your submissions. I wish I could cover them all, but I've only got a certain amount of, I've got a limited amount of time. If you want to talk to me individually, reach out on Discord. If you become a YouTube member, this is one of the perks, is I will do this sort of thing for you for free. Thank you to my YouTube members for supporting me and my shenanigans. I greatly appreciate it. And thanks for listening to my ramblings. I know this one is a little bit more of a community event than it is as popular of a series as some of my other, like my meta reviews and such. So, but I love doing this. I love interacting with the community. It's something that I wish I could do more of. So, but with that though, I think that's going to wrap it up for the community deck techs for Aetherdrift. And just looking at the kind of calendar situation, in 10 days from now, we're going to be kind of shifting gears towards the Tarkir coming to Arena on April 8th. So we could probably squeeze one more in, but I'm kind of tempted to take a break because, like I've mentioned, I've been kind of feeling burnt out a little bit. So after the 28th, I might take the next week off and then be back on the 8th with some Tarkir brews, and then kind of business as normal, resuming Monday the 14th with the best of 1 meta breakers, that sort of thing. So with that's enough rambling for me. Take care, everybody. Hope you all have a good one, and look forward to hearing your comments below.